I'm Thomas Mai.
And I'm Zane Weber.
The Craving Creativity podcast is our cry for help. A way to help ourselves as creatives to talk about how we get inspired, how we create, but also how we deal with stress, mental illness, and everything in between.
Now, if you're creative, you, like us, have most likely always been seen as the black sheep of your family and always making different choices than what 90% of normal people might do. Not going for the safe choice, but always living a little on the edge.
With the Craving Creativity podcast, it is our hope to create a safe space where we can talk about being creative. We want to build a community of like-minded creatives and help each other. Subscribe, email us, and be part of the creative journey. Welcome to Craving Creativity. This is episode 18, the podcast where we talk about being creative and how that fits into the grander scheme of lives, like paying your bills. And today we are talking about being creative on command. My name is Thomas Mai. I'm here with my excellent co-host,
Zane Weber.
And this is a subject that you wanted to talk about, Zane.
Yeah, I've been working as a creative, as a job, for over 20 years now. And that makes me feel very old. And yeah, this is something I definitely I struggled with a lot early on when I was doing very repetitive tasks, but everything needed to be different or new or up or refreshed. When I work for a newspaper and you have a client that runs a similar ad every issue, but they need it to be new and updated and interesting every issue. And you're like, there's only so many things I can do for a boring shoe store in Bundaberg. How do I make it new and fresh and interesting looking every time? So this is what I wanted to talk about, is like, how do you cope with like writer's block, or like when you've got nothing, how do you find inspiration to be creative as a job?
Yes.
Because you have a deadline, you have to get something done.
Yeah.
People are waiting on you.
Yes.
But you've got nothing coming out. The juices have stopped flowing. You're stuck in a gray cement box in your head. How do you do it? Like, how do you summon creativity?
And how did you do it with those shoe ads, which sounds very exciting from a creative point of view, by the way.
How did I do it with those shoe ads? I would usually pick something else that was happening in the newspaper. So if there was like a spring gardening issue, I would make that particular ad also flowery or something. Luckily, that particular client didn't have a very high level of critique. They're just like, yeah, that looks good. We'll do that. And I was like, okay, well, thank you. But like when it comes later on in my thing, where like I'm working with very specific properties. Yeah. So let's say I'm working with a musical, Phantom of the Opera. Yeah. There's very high restrictions on what you can and can't do with that property. Yeah. But every production wants to be interesting and new and eye-catching and kind of a twist on a classic, and like, how do you find that? How do you summon that? And that's something that I come up against a lot with more in visual design than in podcast production, because podcasting, you can literally do anything. It's just up to your imagination. Yeah. So that's something I have an easier time with. However, I will say my one pet peeve with clients who think they're being easygoing, and they just say, go crazy. You know, this is what I want, just go crazy. Yeah. I do like something to go off of, even if it's just a color or a sound or a vibe, something to build upon. And so that's kind of how I deal with it, is I look for inspiration elsewhere to then combine it with the project in a synergetic way. So that's, I mean, because you deal with creativity in a very different way than I do. You're more of a creative problem solver, a creative kind of interpersonal kind of person. So have you ever come up against this kind of creative block?
Well, yes, a creative block. How do you get an actor to show up? Yeah. Or now the director's having a fight with an actor, right? Or logistically, that location that we're going to need tomorrow, we can't get it, even though everybody's supposed to meet there, but we can only get it in 3 days. But in 3 days, the actor can't be there because has other prior commitments. Things like that.
Yeah.
Problems needs to be solved ASAP because you're turning out fires, right? So in that way, I tell myself there's 2 ways, but there's always a 3rd way. And it's defining out where's the 3rd way. And if you know before you go in that there is a 3rd answer to every problem, because normally you think you're going to do this or that. If you know from a start that there is a 3rd way, you start focusing on that and suddenly it will appear.
Yeah.
It sounds weird and crazy, but it's so easy to think everything is yes or no, black and white. But there are variations, right? And there is always a 3rd option. Always. And it's not there, but once you find it, it's like, yes. And you can solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So keep going until you find that 3rd problem, which is annoying. We're sitting late at night and you have to solve something for tomorrow morning, but it has to be found out. It might come to you in the dream, might come in the morning shower where you're rushing out the door. Suddenly, I got it. I got it. This is how we're going to do.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I came up with this problem, again, I'm going to say earlier on in my working career, because I had always been very good at thinking on my feet and just kind of like being able to snap something out. And as soon as I started to rely on that in a working capacity, it was more of a, oh, that's fine. Oh, you want something like this? I can do. And I had nothing. And I was like, well, now what do I do? My brain has failed me. This technique that I had when I wasn't doing it for a job, when it was just kind of like, hey, this would be really interesting, or this would be really fun. This would be a fun project, when it just wasn't there. So a lot of, because I've worked as a graphic designer the majority of the time, a lot of the work that you do as a graphic designer is not particularly inspired work. It is taking elements that already exist and combining them
TDS
to make something that's serviceable rather than inspiring. And so that sort of work gets you in this mindset of like, well, it's not a creative time today. It's not creative time today. And then when you're given something creative to do, it's you have to kind of force that connection in your brain to bring out some creativity. So when I'm working in that way now, I will ask for what do you like. I will ask questions like, what do you want what do you want the communication to be? What do you want the message to be? Do you have preferences in terms of style? Is this meant to be retro? Is this meant to be futuristic? Is this meant to be charming? But
what if they don't know? Because most people don't know what they want until they see it. And then they see something, so I don't want that. And that's the problem. You want limitations, because the more limitations you have, the more creative you become. The problem is you have an open sandbox. You can go in any direction. And you don't know when you are stepping on someone's toes because you haven't been giving any boundaries. And it's so easy to misunderstand a brief, especially if there is none. And therefore a brief is good to have, so you know what to guide within that. And so that's why you mentioned earlier, knock yourself out, right? Go, okay, but, and you sit there and you get all your creative juices flowing. You get so excited about what you've done. You come back and you go, nah, that's not going to fly for us. This is not going to sell any shoes. It's beautiful, but it's not going to sell any shoes.
I'm really creatively invested in this, and it's going to sell shoes. So I guess now I will do a little bit of creative work in that meeting and go like, okay, so if we're going for charming, I'm going to use a lot of flowers and witty words and that sort of thing. If we're going for retro, then we're going to have like an old radio and that and kind of give them some inspiration so that they can give me some limitation. And then you can work from that, because otherwise, like, being creative non-stop for 8 hours a day is exhausting. And so that is, you really need to kind of work with that spring within yourself to either build a dam so that you can keep it welled up, which I do. Like, my computer is full of folders just called inspiration, where I'm like, I love that, save it in the inspiration folder. And then if I'm really stuck, I'll just go through the inspiration folder and hopefully find something.
Or the Pinterest page or Instagram page with folders.
Pinterest is really good at that.
Exactly.
Really good for exactly that. Because, if you want a Captain America cake styled shoe, someone on Pinterest has done that.
Yes, that is true. That is true. So, but what happens if you don't have to be creative on command? Because I think in the previous episode we talked about value versus money, right? And time versus money. If you're not creative on command, nobody's waiting for you. It's just you. Then there's no deadlines, there's no accountability, and often there's no money involved. So, doesn't the two with being creative on command infer that there is a client or somebody's waiting for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, as a workaholic, if I'm not being creatively satisfied at work, I will give myself a project. Whether that is a new podcast or just creating a fun story or creating illustration or whatever. That's kind of my go-to fun time. I think, on demand implies that there is demand. So there is kind of a restriction time-wise, and that's why preparation, again, this is just how I deal with it, is just kind of like, I need to inspire you to give me an inspiration. Because otherwise it's going to be a no, because you don't know what you want, but it's very easy to say what you don't want. And sometimes that's an easy way for me to inspire myself as well, is to kind of look at what other people have done and go like, none of this is what I want. So I can see what other people have done, how that hasn't worked, and then try to find something outside of that already established body of work. So this comes down to, again, working with a musical property like Phantom of the Opera. I'm like, a mask on a black background. Okay, everyone's done that. A mask on a red background. That's interesting, but gross. How do we approach it in a new way?
But with this established property, intellectual property as Phantom of the Opera, people know what they're going to get. So you're going to get these songs. You're going to get these characters. And you're going to get this story. It's sure, you might put a hat on him, right? Or you might put high heels, or you might put a fancy dress or skirt or whatever on one of the characters that was not there before. But is that where the creativity comes in, or?
Yeah, the creativity for me definitely comes in finding that one spot that you can add something to the text. Not in terms of actually adding words or adding iconography. Because
that's forbidden, right?
Usually it's forbidden. But adding an interpretation or a presentation that is surprising in a way that makes people re-examine how they approach something. I think that's creativity within those restrictions, because
maybe make it more current. Make it more, COVID references, politic references.
I think that's definitely an easy way to approach creativity, is taking input from what's happening right now and what's affecting you right now. And that's a very easy way to do it. And so that is obviously usually what we'll do if you're on like a easy timeline, is just like make a different approach to a regular text. In an ideal world, you want to make a deep and meaningful addition to a text. And I can't come up with one for the Phantom of the Opera.
Because if I was doing the Phantom of the Opera, now I cannot remember the story 100%, but I certainly listen to the music a lot, and I've definitely seen it at one time back in the day. But I would, the opera is current society, and there's a phantom, and things are happening, right? And I don't know, I would just make it extremely now so that people can relate to what's going on in the world through the play, and suddenly the text can have added a new meaning, a new purpose, and a new direction, and can become duolingual in its interpretation. That's what I would see if I could grant something. That's if I was creative.
And that's very much how Shakespeare is taken and reinterpreted every few years to like, okay, well, these stories are timeless for these reasons. Like if you add guns and
Romeo and Juliet, right?
And,
on DiCaprio and Clara Danes.
Absolutely.
Luc Besson's film. We talked about that in a previous episode. Exactly. Yeah. So I will look into that if that's allowable. I don't know what the deal is if with Phantom of the Opera and the property and Andrew Lloyd Webber, but there might be something there.
I think we need to wait for ALW to die before we can approach that. He's very, very tight-fisted around his properties.
Well, you've created something and you don't want somebody to run off with it and do something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. He likes to be involved in his properties is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay,
so,
okay.
Yeah, it's usually a production with a very interesting company, which is what his company is called, I think. Yeah.
ALB? Wow, okay, that's good.
ALW. Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to, is creativity on demand and the top 3 we're going to talk about is like how I call it faking creativity.
Yes.
Because I feel it's not truly creative unless you've thought it out and it adds meaning rather than taking a meaning from something else and just kind of surgically implanting it into your project. But it gets the job done.
Yes.
And it has no lesser meaning to those who see it. It just has lesser meaning to me as a creative.
And is that because, now going back to these shoe ads, because I think the shoe ad is just such a perfect metaphor for a creative being stuck in a 9-to-5 and being creative, right? Let's just really milk this shoe ad, okay? Because when you go home, you want to feel like you made a difference, right?
Yep.
And the shoe guy just wants to sell more shoes, right? Yeah. He or she couldn't care less if it's you said the Spring Festival or if it's a fire sale or whatever the theme might be. But
make a face out of shoes.
Yes, but you need to have some fun with it, some creative, get your juices flowing, right?
Yeah.
And the more creative you get, the less shoes most likely they will sell, right? So there's a graph in the middle where your creativity meets a certain amount of shoes being sold, right?
Yeah. And there's definitely an ideal point, and no one's going to know where that point is.
No, because you want the graph is to be as high as creative, but at some point they're going to shoot you down because that's
more esoteric the design is, the less, I guess, applicable it's going to be to retail.
But the more wow factor it'll have for you and for everyone else going, wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The more portfolio worthy for me.
Yes, exactly.
Which is, you want everything to be portfolio worthy because you want to be proud of everything that you do.
Exactly. And that's where the shoe ad comes in as maybe not be the pinnacle of your life's work, okay?
I don't think I've ever put it in a portfolio.
No offense to anyone selling shoes or making shoes. No,
absolutely not.
It's just,
shoes are important.
I just like this because it's so. That's what I think is the essence of what we're trying to do with this podcast. Is like, how do we who are creative fit into that world that can pay us money and still be creative? And that's why the shoe ad is such a good metaphor.
Honestly, the shoe ad would have been perfectly fine if we'd stuck with when I was happy with it, when I was like, this is a really interesting ad, but we had committed to basically doing a new ad every different time. So we need to iterate and be bigger and more interesting. And I ran
pressure.
out of inspiration.
After a while, no more inspiration. I get that.
I can't look at a shoe and see anything else other than a shoe this week. But yeah, so should we move on to our top 3s?
I think that's a great idea.
Sure.
So, do you want to start the first one or should I?
I would like you to, I think.
Okay, so this is what I point out when you wrote to me with this idea. You did say 3 ways to fake creativity. Yep. So I think I took that fake a little more literally.
Please.
So the first thing I do if I have to fake something, fake it until you make it, is to do research.
Yep.
Right? You were mentioning the inspiration folder before, right? Now we are fortunate to live in a time where just open a browser and boom, you can find anything. But there was also a time before that where you had to go down to a library and it was only open between 9 and 5, right? Mm-hmm. And if you weren't there, you had to borrow a book, you had to return on time, and it was a different world. But I think being inspired or being researched or figure out what other people have done who solve a different problem. And I think by finding that, you can see, I like that direction going. It's not what I want to do, but there's something there that I can use. Or I think we talked about that in a previous episode. We talked about great artists don't get inspired, they steal, right?
Yeah.
So I think Picasso said that.
Yeah.
We
Good artist reference, great artist steal.
Exactly. I think Picasso said that. So there's something there. And I think that also because when you steal something or you're inspired by something, you can reference it. By referencing it, it gets a higher meaning for those who know, like, I see what you did there. Other people say, that looks good. But there's a hidden meaning within there. We talked about Salvador Dali leaving was it banana? What was he leaving? Bacon?
Yep.
Sorry, I hit you on the spot here. Salvador Dali, he leaves something sometime. Was it a piece of bacon or?
It was. We talked about bacon, but I think I'm thinking of something else.
Okay.
I'm going to cut this bit out. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. I'm on the spot. I can't think of it. I seem dumb.
Sorry.
It's gone.
And that's not allowable here. That's self-inflicted censorship happening right now. Fair enough. I'm
actually going to jump on this with you because this is something that I do as well. This is not necessarily to steal from other places or take inspiration from what other people have done. Very much so, it's usually to see what other people have done and see what I don't want to do.
Yes.
Because that limits what I can do.
That's what I meant.
And that's how I become creative.
And that's what I like about that. You can see what other people have done. At least, that's one way to solve a problem or inspiration. I like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that we should do that. And we are blessed with the internet now. The problem is, once you start going down that rabbit hole, you got to stop at some point, right? Because A, you got to breathe, and B, you got to be creative because it's just so easy. So, there's a YouTube video over here, and there's a post over there. There's an article about this, and it's good for you, but before you know, you spend 4 hours on it, and you've done nothing.
Absolutely. And honestly, if you go down that rabbit hole, I find that I have the tendency for the project or the brief to morph in my head.
Yeah.
So far away from what I'm meant to be doing that I come back to, I'm like, no, none of that's going to work at all. No. But you were hitting it. This is great. And you come back and you read the brief like, no, that's not going to work. Yeah, I inspired myself,
but I just spent 4 hours being not very productive.
Yeah.
And I was high on that creative flow I had, but I didn't make my client happy, and now my boss is not happy either.
Yeah. Well, I'll take that as my number 3. I'll switch it with my number 2. My number 2 was do something tangentially related.
Yeah.
For me, when I was doing a lot of visual design, rather than starting with a visual if I didn't have anything to go on, I would start typographically. I would find a great font and then I'd try to do something just with letters and writing and arrangement to kind of get the idea across, and then I could usually translate that into a more holistic design and creativity in and of itself. So while the text might not be used in the way that it was, it's a much more limited scope of creativity, and something that you can kind of find the vibe and refine a little bit before you come back to the project as a whole and do something much more, I guess it feels a lot more fleshed out to me as a creative person. I've never asked whether anyone else has thought that this design is better than this design because I did something that was totally not related to it before I did it. But that definitely helps the process along with me, because you can put, half an hour, I'm going to do a flyer for this booklet that I'm working on. I have no idea of the style of, so I'm just going to work on this kind of just text flyer to make it visually grabbing, so that I can then take that inspiration and apply it to the project itself.
Speaking of that, and those who've been following this podcast, is that you came up with the logo for the podcast, the Creating Creativity, which as soon as I saw it, I just loved it. And if you are listening on Spotify, not on Apple, on Spotify, you will notice that there's a new episode graphics. There's new art for every episode. It's subtle, but it's there, and I love it. And it took me a while to find out you're actually doing that. And nobody asked you to do it. You don't have to do it, but you're doing it, and you're just adding that little piece so that each graphic comes up different for each episode. I love it. I think it's amazing. Again, if you're listening through this on Apple, you will not see it because they will only take the show. The standard show episode, but on Spotify and other places, they will go in and show the individual artwork you do for each episode. I love that. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. And that's, again, part of just like, I find creative inspiration.
Yeah, no, I love
the
it.
projects that I do day to day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So what was your number 2?
Well, I think I started talking so much before that I actually started talking about the second one, and that was copying other people's ideas to be inspired. So the research and that. So I think I copied those two, but one thing was the research, another thing is to steal that. So I've already covered it. I'm sorry about that, but that's how I did that.
Will never forgive you.
So those are my ways to fake creativity.
Yeah. Well, I guess my number 1 is my biggest one, and that is revisiting work I've done before.
Yeah.
Because again, you can see the progression, and that gives you an idea of the momentum of either my work as a designer and go like, this is something I've done before that I haven't really used in a while, whether it's typographically or photo editing or vector design or whatever. And bringing that inspiration to the new project, I think that is an easy way to find inspiration that comes from within you. And it's not self-plagiarizing because there's no content that's similar. It's really just a style or a technique that kind of could apply to this new project, and again give me a little bit of direction to where it needs to go. And even if it fails, and the client says, no, that's not what we wanted at all, it's going to give me a strong voice to then work against.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, I think that's why my filing, I have files from way back when I started working, just so I can go back and I can revisit everything that I've done for years now.
And that's so beautiful with computers. You just have infinite storage. Or in the old days, you had these filing cabinets with pieces of paper that printed. When it was lost. But now we just have infinite storage.
Deteriorate and fall apart. But
it's amazing that we can do that. My last one is faking it is podcasting. What we're doing right now.
Okay.
I feel that we're doing that right now, and I feel I don't know what I'm going to say before I say it. So I of course I do a little bit of research. I have to come up. We take turns coming up with the theme, and we have to come up with those top 3. And I spend some time on that, maybe half an hour. But then in that, once we get there, there's a flow that happens when we start talking, and I don't know what I'm going to say next, literally, but it comes out. That's what I like about what we're doing.
That is a great way to get through a block as well, is ask someone else what they think.
Yes.
And whether they say something that's inspiring and you go like, yes, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. Or they say something truly redundant and ridiculous and go like, what? No, I can't. I'll do the opposite of that.
Yes, exactly.
Talking with someone is a real way to engage the creative parts of your brain.
Exactly.
If you access them regularly, I think that is our connection with other humans is definitely how we are creative. That's what inspires creativity.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's important. And many people are doing all these PowerPoint presentations, and God, there's so many PowerPoint presentations out there, and it's so terrible. And there's like many words, many bullet points per page, all come up at the same time, and people. Anyway, I don't know why I start talking about that right now, but it's just like let's make better PowerPoint presentations and make a world a better place and have more fun. That's why I'm saying that, because my God, death by PowerPoint is not fun.
Yeah, the tendency to put every single word from a presentation into a PowerPoint
and then just repeat that and say the same as just up there. And why are you even talking? I don't get it.
Just give me the PowerPoint.
Yes,
I'll get through this in a quarter of the time.
A quarter in 5 minutes as opposed to wasting you 1 hour repeating everything you just said up there. Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's the episode.
That was number 18.
Please let me know how you fake creativity, listeners.
Yes.
I would like new techniques, please.
Yes.
Luckily, I'm not in that position a lot anymore. Now that I am in a position to approach projects at the speed at which I feel capable of, now that I work for myself, creative block is far between now.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the appeal of gig culture, is that you get to approach work on your terms.
Exactly.
9 to 5 does force this kind of arbitrary limitation on like how you're creative.
Exactly. And that, because again, going back to your shoe ad, first you have to please your manager, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
editorial and the money turning over the newspaper, but you also got to please this shoe guy.
Yep.
And they have conflicting interest in mind. One want to sell an ad, the other one want to sell shoes, and you want to be creative. There's a conflict happening
And
there.
I want people to look at a newspaper and go like, wow,
that guy.
shoe ad.
Give me the number of the guy who made that shoe ad right now, okay? This guy's going places.
If only that were the case. But yeah, so let us know how you fake creativity or how you force creativity, because honestly, you can never be too prepared.
And we have a Facebook page now.
We are committed to communicating with you through Facebook.
Please find us on Craving Creativity on Facebook, on the podcast. Yeah.
And send this to a friend who you know is struggling with creative block right now, whether they're a writer or a musician or a dancer or a teacher. Everyone is creative, and it's hard to be creative all the time. So yeah, send this episode to them.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Zane.